"So who is this Ashur-Magi we're meeting, Arkus?" Rubis asked of his tutor as the group neared a rickety old-looking shop. "An old friend," Arkus said with a smile as he opened the door to the shop and gestured the siblings in. The jingle of a small bell that hung above the door rang pleasantly upon their arrival. It would sound the entrance of customers and beckoned the owner of the Magicka shop to come stepping down the stairs. Yes, one moment." A honey-slick voice would resound from the stairs. The smooth voice belonged to a very slender, well-dressed Jakun. He had tall ears and dark skin, close to ebony. There were green rings tattooed around his slender but toned arms, shown by the rolled-up sleeves of his white shirt and vest. Along with his markings came the look of green stark eyes that lit up with generous greetings, only to dim once they laid on Arkus, sullying the once sweet and slick voice to turn cold and bitter. "Oh, it's you. Don't sound too excited to see me, Abdol. You know I came all this way just to see you." Arkus mocked the Jakun with a smirk and rested his elbow on the wooden counter of the front desk, a leg crossed over the other. He had that all-accustomed smug grin on his face as he'd watched the Jakun take his time making his way behind the counter. "Charmed?" the Jakun known as Abdol said dryly, with a roll of his vividly coloured eyes. He sighed and sat in the wooden chair positioned behind the desk. Like a worn parent over his child, he'd lean his head on a hand, elbow on the chair's arm, and regarded Arkus with tired, lidded eyes. "What do you want, Arkus?" "Now that is no way to greet guests, Abdul. Didn't Master Nabu teach us better than that?" "You are no guest, Arkus. If anything—" Abdul began, but flicked his eyes to the three young Volkin behind him and sighed with another roll of his eyes, dropping his arm that rested his head and pushed the chair back to stand up. "I'll make some tea." "Please, if you don't mind," Arkus said with the same smugness that never seemed to leave when around the Jakun. Abdul walked over to the right side of the shop where a modest stone-walled fireplace sat. He'd pump some water from the faucet next to it into a bucket made of wood, then scoop out some water in a tin cup with a small handle and poured it into the tea kettle that hung from a rack over the fireplace. Arkus would watch the lengthy actions of the Jakun in silence, his chin held in his hand as he was still leaning on the front desk. Abdol would use a hand gesture similar to what the young Volkin siblings would see Arkus do when casting Ashur-Magicka to light up the fireplace. The once cold bundle of logs that sat in the fireplace were suddenly sparked with a flicker of flame before it would rise to life with the rays of the Jakun's hand. He'd take a moment to level the intensity of the flame with a simple push of his hand, bringing the roaring fire to a even level under the tea kettle. Another sigh slipped out of the Jakun's mouth as he'd turned to the group. "Now then, Arkus, how can I help you? I'm sure you didn't come to buy anything from the shop here, so you'll have to excuse me if I sound a bit skeptical on you being here." Arkus straightened up from leaning on the counter and walked over to Abdol. His smile never faded. "Actually, I did come here to buy something." Abdol looked from Arkus, then to the three siblings who looked bored out of their mind as their eyes wandered the shop. They remained close to each other and never separated to explore the shop itself, showcasing their lack of curiosity of the place. Abdol snorted and looked back at Arkus. "I didn't take you for the type to adopt apprentices." He'd paused to look at the youngkin closely, who were now teens at this point, and sniffed before glaring at Arkus. "They look like your kind, but they smell different." "Volkin, they're Volkin," Arkus simply said, glancing from the tea kettle to Hassani expectantly. Abdol visibly flinched, then suddenly took Arkus by the arm, pulling him over to the fireplace and out of earshot of the Volkin. "Are you mad? Bringing Volkin to this place, let alone this city?" "Careful, they can still hear you. Volkin tend to have excellent hearing, you know." "That's not the point, Arkus." Abdol seethed through his fangs before he'd sigh and compose himself, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I didn't think I'd have to tell you the dangers of dealing with the likes of Volkin. However, I am talking to you. I see you're also hiding from yourself again. Flirting with danger as always." "You're not too far off on that note," Arkus said, crossing his arms, seemingly proud of this. This earns him another glare from the Jackan, who looked to the siblings, then held his elbows with his hands, chewing on his thoughts, before his eyes would click on Arkus again. You realize you're putting us all in danger by bringing them here, yes? That is why I'm looking to make this visit short and to the point, Abdol. There was a serious tone to Arkus's voice, and Abdol picked up on it. The Jackan paused for a moment to consider hearing the Volcari out, then looked to the kettle just as it was starting to whistle with boiling water. We'll speak about it over tea. Sounds good. After the serving of tea with the siblings picking over their drink, both Abdol and Arkus get to it. Arkus explains the cause of him being in the city and why he needed the Ashur Magi's help, to which the green Ashur Magi insists on the reasoning behind it all. So, you're telling me that unless I help you, the world will be at stake? It is perilous that you do, Arkus said through folded hands in front of his mouth, seated in one of the armchairs closest to the fireplace. Abdol gave the Volcari an indigenous huff as he drank from his teacup. The mighty Arkus seeking help from others? That is historical. Arkus gave the jesting Jackan a look before he'd flick his index finger towards him, causing the teacup the Jackan smugly drank from to suddenly tilt over as if it were hit by something, spilling tea all over the Jackan's business vest and slacks. Abdol gasped loudly and looked down at his ruined outfit, then to Arkus with a look of angered shock. That was my best vest, you son of a bitch. Steel your enthusiasm to look down on me in this moment of opportunity and heed my words, Abdol, for this is dire for not only us, but you and the entire world as well. What I say to you is true. We need your help. Abdol ailed his words a moment and looked Arkus up and down, then silently nodded before he'd smooth his hand down his chest, using the method of steam to quickly dry the tea that soiled his outfit. All right, I will reconsider.